My name is Chris. I'm an educator. I grew up in the Philippines. My parents served over there for all of their lives, and I came back in 1987 to pursue college and began my teaching career in South Oklahoma City in 1992. By about 1998, I had decided I could no longer be a teacher. It wasn't the teaching. I loved my content. It wasn't the students. I adored my students. But it was a system that continued to debilitate those that were engaged in it at all levels. And I could not see pouring my one precious life out in such a manner any longer. I understand what teachers feel like, but I stayed in education, and that's a story for another day. I'd love to share with you at some time. And today I want to reflect on some of my experience over those last nearly 30 years working with kids in the public education system. The title of my talk today is The Semillas del Pueblo, the seeds of our city. I want to confess, though, that although I frequently speak in front of groups and I run my mouth a lot to my friends, I am really struggling today to give this talk. The struggle is very real to me in all types of ways. It's real because I deeply want to leave an indelible mark on your hearts and minds today about what I consider to be one of the most significant issues that we as adults can and should face in our society. My talk is not a sexy talk. It's not an exciting technology. It's not even a creative way to look at a common issue. It's not a beautiful narrative of hope. It's simply laying out the plight of our children and a potential solution that we might address together. I'm told that the Maasai tribesmen of Kenya and northern Tanzania have a traditional greeting that they offer one another, and undoubtedly poor pronunciation notwithstanding, bear with me, they say Kasarian Ingera to one another, which literally translates to, how are the children? It's an interesting salutation, and one that I want us to ponder just a bit today, because it really gets to the heart of what we as adults ought to be inquiring of one another about the well-being of our communities. Because you see, if you can answer in the affirmative, if you can say unequivocally, the children in my community are well, then you're saying lots of things. You're saying that food sources are secure, that medical resources are abundant. You're saying that infrastructure is operating, that family units are intact, that enemies are at bay, that there is peace in the community, because those things have to happen for children to thrive. As it turns out, they also have to happen for adults to thrive. But if you cannot answer that your children are well, it should require us as a community to do some real soul searching. Nelson Mandela said there can be no keener revelation of the society's soul than the manner in which it treats its children. I've thought about this a lot in the last 30 years of working with kids. By the way, it's nothing personal, but I don't even like grown-ups. I love kids. I love hanging out with them. I'm just tolerating you all today because I want to talk to you about kids. I love children, and I believe that Mandela has this right that society should not be evaluated on their material wealth or their military might or their technology contributions or their ability to generate entertainment that's absorbed and consumed by the planet. But in fact, societies can and should and maybe hopefully will be evaluated on how well we rear the young that we have been given the honor of raising. How has it become normal then in the most affluent society, the most powerful nation, the most technologically advanced country that has ever existed in all of humanity, for us to allow vast swaths of our children to not be prospering? How is it possible that we can look at literacy rates and not be overwhelmed with grief that so many children cannot read? How can we look at generational poverty and find it an acceptable status quo in our communities? Well, I say we shouldn't. But when I engage people about this, sometimes eyes glaze over a bit. And I've thought about this. How can you not care about kids? And I think people care about kids. In fact, I know we care about our kids and those in proximity to our kids, perhaps. But those kids are another story. I would ask us to think about those kids, maybe not even in an altruistic way, but in a pragmatic way today. Because I do believe that it is in the adults' best interest that our children thrive. And if there's no other reason we can reflect on this other than it's good for us, I would say today we need to look to our children's well-being. At the turn of the century, miners were experiencing a lot of loss as they worked. Carbon monoxide poisoning was rampant down the shafts of these places that they worked. And a scientist said, I have an idea that may save some lives. And he proposed placing canaries in small cages inside of the coal mines and other mines. You see, he'd studied canaries and knew that they were hypersensitive to the air quality. And their little bodies took in twice as much air and needed twice as much oxygen to be able to thrive. They served, of course, as early warning devices for the miners because they could look at the health and well-being of the canaries and say, as long as they are thriving, we're going to be okay. But the moment the canaries began to be in distress, they knew they had to don their oxygen masks or leave immediately. And I would say to you, it would do us well to look to the well-being of our children in our society. Even as adults who are concerned about our own well-being, if our children are not thriving, we cannot thrive as adults. Well, how did we get to this point? How did we as sentient, intelligent, educated people arrive at this stage in humanity and say, our kids aren't well, but that's okay? Maybe because we've looked at kids not as humans, but as cogs, as replacement parts for adults. For so long, what we've done in our society, if you analyze the institutions, as many of us have, of education and business and even churches and nonprofits, frankly, we look at the rearing of children as simply replacing the adults that are going on before them, to fill the jobs and vocations, to walk in the pathways and walk in the worn-out shoes of their fathers. If that's the case, then we produce enough cogs, we're going to have enough replacement parts for us to go on. But it diminishes the beauty and opportunity and the humanity of these beautiful humans we have been given the opportunity to rear. So here's my proposal. I'd like to ask a question of us in this community and perhaps beyond. What if our community were the best place in the world to raise a child? What would it mean if the empirical data proved that the healthiest children in the world were coming from within our community? What would that mean about the decisions we had made as adults? What would it mean that our community would be known for? Now, I want you to begin to conceptualize this idea of a community where every child, regardless of their racial background or their socioeconomic status or their parents' education level, where every child had the opportunity to grow and become who they could become. It's kind of an exciting idea. I think about this in this way then, not children as cogs, but children as seeds. I'm somewhat of an amateur gardener. I'm not very good, but I love to grow things. It's therapeutic for me, and late winter and early spring when those seed catalogs begin to arrive, some of you get those. You're also an addict as I am. And you begin to thumb through those as I do, looking at what my friends call my farmer porn. And I'm looking at these things, these beautiful pictures of produce and grains and herbs. I'm like, I must buy seeds. And then my children can't talk me down. My wife just shakes her head, and I purchase the seeds. They arrive to me in these beautiful packages. And I know as a gardener, I don't have to take the seeds out and convince them to be what they're supposed to be. I've got one job, to provide the things that my seeds need so they can become the things they will become. They need air, water, soil, light. And my job as a gardener then is to ascertain the when and how much they need so that they will become what they are already inherently capable of becoming? What if we viewed our children as seeds, not as replacement parts for us? What if we said there is so much more we conceptualize as a society than simply moving the next generation of productive members of a democratic society, but to see what our kids really could become if given what they needed to thrive and flourish? That's an exciting idea to me. It's one that would cause us as adults to ask a different question. The question would be, in all of our context, is the decision we are about to make in the best interests of our children? Not a common adult question. I'm the father of 9. I don't often ask that question. It's my way or my way. This is how this works. And as adults, we're prone to answer this question in our own best interest. Not necessarily what's best for children, but what does enable me the autonomy to live as freely as possible as an adult. This is a deceptive pathway we have walked down. Oftentimes, we have limited our own potential by thinking solely about our adult selves as opposed to the rearing of those children in our care. What if we said in every boardroom, is this decision we're about to make going to benefit the children in our society? If city council and our elected officials said, is the decision we're about to make on this zoning or policy or legislative issue genuinely going to lead to healthier outcomes for our children? What if our churches and nonprofits asked that? What if our schools designed schools around children and not around the adults employed within the system? Well, I would propose to you that we would be able to answer the question, Canaries in Gera, with the appropriate response of sapati in Gera, which means the children are well. Would you join me in thinking about our community as an ecosystem into which we all can contribute to the well-being of our children? Would you join me in asking that question? Is the decision I or my organization are making in the best interest of the children in our community? And if so, I believe we will be able to answer the question. The children in our city are well, with a resounding yes. Thank you.